Welcome to the world of Vintage Story. A world filled with creatures of horror, a world of desperation, starvation, and many other Asians. I will spend 100 days here in the wilds, fighting nature itself, but also knocking down several of my own self-imposed goals. Within the next 100 days, I will progress to the Iron Age, explore several of the newly added mechanics and use them to my advantage, and complete the Resonance Archives, which are one of the most dangerous places in Vintage Story. And all of that while playing hardcore permadeath mode for the very first time, where one misstep, one lost fight, oh god, okay, he hit me for like half my HP, one mistake can delete my world forever. Welcome to my 100 days in hardcore Vintage Story. We start off by making our character, and while I use the same base as always, this time we are playing hardcore Vintage Story. So I decided to grow a beard and drop my voice a little bit. Because now we have to wear the big boy pants. And just to make it more interesting, this time I decided to pick the Blackguard class. And while that means I will be a bit tankier, and I hopefully won't end this video too prematurely by dying to some deer or something, I also have a massive debuff to hunger rate. And that's going to play a much larger role than I thought. I appeared in the world and this time no world generation mods, so we have to fully embrace the uneven hilly vanilla terrain. I started off by grabbing any local flint and berries to fight off the already pretty speedy hunger. And hey, the berry bushes look different now. But while watching plants is cool, I do need some sticks, so I whacked some trees to get some. And that means it is napping time. I slammed rock into rock until I had a knife, axe and some spear tool heads. Then I combined them with a stick to magically turn them into proper tools. But now another early game beat. Those cattails are looking quite nice in the water, so I cut them with my new knife to finally make my first equipment basket to get that nice inventory space. And hey, copper bits right next doors are fine too. So I grabbed them and marked the location for later mining operations. But that's when I noticed that those copper bits wanted to tell me something. I spotted a familiar looking white rock on that mountainside, so I started making my way there to investigate. After all, it could not possibly be what I think it is. But then my train of thought got derailed, as some goat took me looking at rocks personal. My god, I almost got killed by a goat or something, that's... And yes, while I did escape, I almost died day one to a freaking goat. This playthrough would be over slightly more soon than I expected. Well, new strict rule, do not approach any animals until I get more comfortable with having just one life. Okay, but now I approach the mountain, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have a whole layer of limestone a stone's throw away from the spawn. So while that means basically free leather making without the need to walk half a world away, I still need a pickaxe to get it. So it's a goal for the future. So for now I focus on getting more cattails to get all the baskets first. And while it did take a moment, here is the beautiful sight of a 2x6 equipment grid. I will try not to spend all of it at once. Okay, but it is getting late, so now I decided to quickly grab some more evening wood. And while my poor stone axe did not let me get all of that walnut tree, this will do. So now, panicked since it's getting dark, I started shoveling away some dirt. I started making the best dirt house I can afford, which is not a very good one, but it has to do for that night. Now inside, and protected from all the evil and the elements, I crafted a new axe, and then used it to make some firewood from the walnut tree I chopped up earlier. And thanks to the firewood, I can now make fire, but actually not yet. So I cut some grass from my very primitive front porch to craft the fire starter. And then I used the fire starter to start a fire using pure friction, physics and logic. But hey, do you see this bar at the bottom of my screen? This is the oxygen bar. I completely forgot that I have the realistic smoke mod installed, effectively meaning I am suffocating myself with the smoke and trapped in my luxury apartment, which is kind of neat, but it is also very not fun to realize this on a hardcore playthrough on the first night. And I don't even have doors yet, so I built this amazing contraption, known as a hole in the ceiling. That helped. But one problem being solved doesn't mean anything. I picked the Blackguard class, and I'm absolutely starving at an impressive rate while doing absolutely nothing. So I crafted a torch, and while I was about to leave, I started getting shot by the local boathorn guy. Something is shooting at my house. This is the best first night ever. might be. I might just starve as well. That's crazy. That's actually kinda cool. I like it. It's super nice. So, I marked my current position on the map as home for now, and sprinted out of my hut to do some hunting and scavenging for food. Mobilized by the new fishing mechanics I heard about, I checked out the local pond, but I did not find any fish unfortunately. So instead I went into the wilderness in search of some animals to shish kebab with my stone spear. And that's when I got brutally attacked by the local wild goats. And that fight was surprisingly not in my favor. Being pretty much one hit away from permanently dying, I jumped into the lake, extinguishing my torch and throwing blind spear stabs until I heard the goat die. But the victory was short-lived. Since I was low on health and starving, I was panic running from one berry bush to another, sustaining myself on scraps the whole night. And all that until I saw the first morning light, which was a huge relief, because now on the second day I was able to finally see things and search for food more actively. So I explored around this stone arch area, which actually looked quite cool. I immediately started imagining my future house somewhere here, but let's not get too attached just yet. I did also spot something new again, the fast-flowing streams of water, and apparently their speediness can be harnessed to power automation now. But then I walked 2 steps to the right and I spotted more weird-looking berry bushes. I had no idea they come in so many new forms now. Okay, but since this area is so cool, I decided to start preparing the ground here for my future shelter. It wasn't fancy, but I just needed something in between me and the elements. So I built this nice little hut from medium fertility soil, which is definitely a flex. This fertile hut will have to do for now. So to make it more like my real life home, I decided to put some doors in, and now it truly feels special. But while having doors is a neat thing, not starving is even neater. The blackguard hunger is a real struggle. So I ran around picking up all the stuff I could find to fill up my blackguard stomach. Oh, I found a boar. But do I want to approach a boar on a hardcore? I think I got him. So I cut up an orange-colored boar for some meat. But this wasn't enough food yet, so I chased around my next target. And this big boy of a boar almost escaped my pursuit by jumping headfirst into a cave. No! Not there! Man, come on. Not into the caves. Okay, I got him. 12. Oh, nice. Apparently this was one of the new boars recently added to the game, and I am not complaining. So I munched on some victory cranberries and made my way back to my moist and fertile dirt hut. I needed to make the 19 red meat into 19 cooked meat now to not perish from hunger. And since I had a bad experience with inhaling toxic fumes before, I built a little chimney to help me breathe better. But that's when I started hearing weird noises in my head, and turns out I made the most basic vintage story blunder of all time. I settled in a temporally unstable area, making me slowly lose my mind over time. Really? I'm just gonna keep losing sanity if I'm gonna stay here, basically. Oh my god. I checked the surrounding chunks for better odds, but this entire East Lake coast was hurting my fragile brain. So I spent an enjoyable night with cosmic horror music playing in my head. Because in the morning, when the sun started shining bright like a diamond, I deconstructed my moist dirt hut and swam across the lake to settle down for the 3rd time. And here, on the west coast, I found a nice temporally stable spot that looked good. So again, I flopped my rectangular arms around and made this. The moist hut, Mark II. A thing of beauty, really. So I started cutting some cattails, and I mean the plants. I am not a monster. I needed to use them to make some reed chests, because some chests is better than non-chests. But all this dirt hut building made me have quite a bit of spare medium fertility soil on my hands. So I used it to make my first iteration of a farm, and go from a starving blackguard to a farming blackguard who's potentially still starving. But to make sure I survive, I decided to swim across the lake and grab even more soil. I wanted to have a 100% guarantee that I won't end this video by just starving to death. So I used the new dirt in combination with the old dirt and made the farm extra big. Now I just have to till all the blocks and plant some seeds to get free food forever. So I began by making 2 flint holes by bashing rocks together on a dirty ground. And then I walked around around in the local wilds, gathering all the wild seeds I could spot. Thankfully, it seemed that Mother Nature was kind to me this time, and there was no shortage of wild crops and other wild things, like this wild copper in its natural wild habitat. But since it was dark, and the scary sounds were extra scary when you have only one life, I came back home. I tried to cure some of the raw hides I got last time, but to my surprise, I could no longer combine hides with fat to make primitive clothes. And apparently, now fat has to be rendered in a pot first, before I can use it like that, which makes my life harder. So instead, I used my hose to make my new farm farmable. After all, farming is the pillar of not dying of hunger. And after the ground was ready to receive my seeds, I planted all of them, which admittedly was mostly flax and some onions. But that also means I have officially settled this land. Now, we wait. And by wait, I mean cut some grass with a painfully slow stone knife and make a bed out of it. So now I destroyed the natural growing grass in my house and put a bed in its stead. And having a bed has its perks, like being able to sleep or do many other things you can do probably in a bed. Like for instance, accelerating your hunger meter while sleeping. So that sucks. I guess sleeping only works if I have pockets full of snacks. So since I am very much on the poverty side of having food, I decided to switch priorities. I have a ton of horsetail plants growing everywhere around my little hut, so I grabbed as many as I could. Then I cut some more cattails. Still, mostly the plants, since I could not see any actual cats around here. And, with the power of friendship, I combined both tails to create the perfect medical implement. The horsetail poultice. This way, I can go hunting for actual food, and not be scared of dying from wounds or starvation, since I can just bandage up my hungry stomach, I guess. So now, I was walking around in the wilds, having to hunt, but deep down gravely scared of being one-shot by a random bear in the woods. But then I forgot all about that, because I found an interesting looking structure. And this turned out to be a merchant. Usually, they appear in wagons, but I guess now they have a proper cozy home. Apart from their different living situation, they also look much younger and less shrunk. Now, this one is a commodity trader, so he or she is not very useful to me at the moment anyway. So, after all that, I went into the wilderness yet again to look for some real food. But instead, I found some copper. Then, got chased around by wolves. Oh! And then, I found some more copper. Anything but food, it seems. But then I did find some spell seeds for my farm, just to get immediately chased around by a black bear. Which, admittedly, made me poop my primitive pants a little bit. After I got home, I planted all my new seeds, which weren't many, but I can't complain. I am alive after all. Since my hunting expedition provided no food, I decided to give it another go. And that's when I noticed a fish swimming right in front of me. So yeah, turns out we have fish in our lake. And apparently, fishing has received quite an update since the last time I played.
Oh, it's different now. You can't hit them, I think. Ooh, you just picked them up. You just picked them up. That's crazy. Okay, I thought there was no fish here. I guess we have some fish here, which is better than none.
Fish are now a pick-upable item, rather than a carcass you have to skin to get the meat. And not only that, I can put the fish on the ground manually, and then MasterChef all over it to get several pieces of fish meat from one fish. So I excitedly spent some time swimming in the lake, terrorizing the local carp population. This lake might just be the saving grace of my insatiable blackguard hunger, at least for now. So I brought some of the fish home to prepare them for my belly. But when I got home and cooked the fish, turns out that one fish meat gives you only 100 hunger, which isn't a lot. Fishing might not actually be worth the trouble for now, given how fast I get hungry. But I decided not to give up so easily. So, I decided to make a fishing rod, a new item added alongside those fishing changes. So, I made some rope out of cattails, and combined it with sticks, made out of sticks. And this way, I had created my very first fishing rod, cinematically posing for this very shot against my dirt hut. But that's not all. I also need some kind of bait, and here comes a live worm. So I made another brand new item, a worm grunting stick, and with its help, I was able to summon my personal worms, almost like that one Jesus guy in Dune Part 2. So now, like a complete maniac, I walked around and picked up all the worms in the vicinity. Absolutely yummy. But all this Lisan algaibing actually made me properly hungry. So this time I went for a hunt without any sidetracking, just fully focusing on stabbing boars. And I actually managed to kill quite a bit of them, and some of them more profitable than others. And as it turns out, if you know where to look, there is plenty of animals to hunt around here. So, after all this fun in the morning, I came back home. 35 pieces of red meat should sustain me for a while. So, I planted more seeds I found. And then, finally came back to the fishing stuff, to become the ultimate fishing uncle. So I put a live worm as bait on the fishing rod through the crafting grid. And now I was finally able to fish in Vintage Story, for the very first time, using an actual fishing rod, which is, in a way, a huge deal.
Oh, that is so cool. That is actually so cool. Actual fishing in Vintage Story. That's crazy.
So yeah, while playing in permadeath mode is pretty stressful, just sitting here and fishing is a nice change of pace. But I still had some figuring out to do. I wasn't sure how fishing actually works yet, especially that the first fish I ever caught, I caught on accident, and it just randomly appeared in my inventory.
Hello, I got a perch. How? What? I have a fish. I don't remember catching it at all.
So I put one more live worm as bait, and this time I did figure it out. When you see a splash, it means you caught a fish. And then, by the power of right-clicking, it teleports into your inventory. And this way you can catch however many fish you want. So now I catapult the fish, and well, turns out that worm bait only attracts smaller ones, which is not very food efficient. But since I mostly fished out of curiosity and not necessity, I stocked up on some firewood instead, and then I made a shovel, because now I had to go out into the wilderness once more, this time to find some clay and finally move into the pottery age. Mostly to make some cooking pots to make my food addiction easier to manage long term. But as per usual, this land knows what I need and hides it from me every time. Instead of clay, I found a bunch of plants for my farm and some copper, of which there seems to be an abundance here. So I came home, mostly empty-handed. And I say mostly because I already hit the necessary marker of 40 copper nuggets to kickstart my copper age and metal tool making when the time is right. And the same goes for my farm. I get more and more plants each time I leave my house, which fares well for the future. But already the next morning I went out for yet another clay expedition, and this time I found more copper. I am suffering from success here. And after wandering around for a good while, I declared that there is no clay in the vicinity. The western part of the map is completely devoid of any clay I could find, and that leaves the east side a bit more promising, especially since it rains here all the time. It makes for perfect grazing grounds for wild clay. Because after walking around for pretty much the entire day, I found nothing but a bunch of more copper. I guess this land is absolutely abundant in everything, apart from the one thing I need to progress. And on the 7th day, I departed once more, in search of the mythical clay. And this time, after traveling north for a while, I actually finally spotted some. So without hesitation, I started shoveling away. This is our ticket to the first row of the Copper Age right here. And not only did I gather a solid 5 stacks, but that clay deposit is not that far from my home. So now I came back to my beautiful, luxurious homestead. And after clearing out some weeds growing in my living room, I was finally able to do what I was born to do: clay form some stuff into existence. So I started from a cooking pot, since a more sophisticated meal plan is necessary to hit my gym goals of not starving before summer. But I also made some clay bowls, because I am a civilized man and I refuse to eat from the ground. I also made the stuff necessary for my Copper Age ascension, so molds for a hammer and a pickaxe, but also the crucible in which I will smelt all my precious copper. And now I have a beautiful collection of raw clay dishes. But unfortunately I cannot eat out of moist raw clay, so I will need to fire them in kilns later to harden, because for now I decided to spend the rest of the evening hunting for some worms, and using them as bait for my new fishing hobby. And just as I was about to cook all the new fishies, I got brutally attacked in my own house by a bunch of assassins clearly sent by Santa. So after dispatching this feeble attempt at my life, I plugged the hole from which they entered. Didn't stop them from trying to get me anyway though. And the morning wasn't much better. I was being assaulted from every direction. I guess there has to be some rift behind my house or something, spawning all those great discount Walmart zombies. So I made my escape into the lake in an attempt to despawn whatever was still around my house. And surprisingly, after bathing for like an hour, they all actually went away. So now I have to shovel. I wanted to make some space for my future clay firing area. I even got some sand to prevent any potential plants from growing into that zone, which could cause massive fires and potentially collapse the entire ecosystem here. And especially that I do seem to have quite a bit of sand just northwest of my house. So I brought it home and made a little artificial beach, and then made a bunch of holes in it, where my future clay stuff will be fired. When that was done, I started grabbing the materials needed to make kilns, so I started cutting grass around my house. But then, completely by chance, I noticed that holding an item in the offhand actually increases my hunger rate by a solid 20%. So yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. My left hand is clearly much more calorie hungry when holding things, and that's a legitimate medical concern. So after that I grabbed some sticks, this time making sure my left hand is as flaccid as possible. Then I put all my beautiful clay crafts in the holes. And since I still had some spare clay, I decided to make one more thing. A clay vessel, a chest of sorts that can also act like a fridge for food. Then I put all the dry grass on top of the clay stuff, then sticks on top of the dry grass on top of the clay stuff, and then firewood on top of the sticks on top of the dry grass on top of the clay stuff. And since firing kilns don't usually pair well with rain, I built what I can only call an attempt. This beautiful structure will prevent rain from extinguishing my beautiful burning clay. So now I put fire on top of all that, and tada, we have a bunch of clay slowly getting cooked. So since I have a moment now, I grabbed the fishing rod yet again. And hey, my live worms kind of died in my pockets. And while keeping worms as pets is clearly not my strength, dead worms are actually described as good bait for fishing, which in a morbid way means I did a kind of a good job forgetting about them. So now I spent some time actually fishing, and while it's still kind of new to me, I did seem to do a more than fine job catching a bunch of them, even if all of them were pretty small and did not provide much meat. But to make sure I won't starve, I decided to swim to the east shore and do a little scavenging. So I grabbed all the berry bushes I could find and hunted a bunch of boars to hit that nail home, or whatever the expression is. And when I had more or less enough food, I swam back home, which is now lit up like a beacon because of all that clay firing. And now the rest of the evening cooking meat. I seem to be starving pretty much all the time right now, spending hunger on hunting just to eat and have to hunt again. So the next morning I decided to go spearfishing, since that way I could actually catch bigger fish. I came up with an amazing strategy of scaring the ever-loving caviar out of the fish to make them get stuck in block corners for easier spearing. But I've heard that overfishing can actually cause the fish population to collapse in any given lake, and while I wasn't sure how true that is, I decided to not risk it. I noticed a large lake to the west, so instead of disturbing the ecosystem at my own doorstep, I decided to head there to disturb another one instead. But while I was traveling, I got spooked by heavy-sounding footsteps. I didn't even dare to look back at what was chasing me. I just booked it. It did sound like a bear though, and I'm not risking getting two shot by a beast that is stronger and faster than me. Possibly smarter too. But after some time, I got to lake number 2, and while it is beautiful and all I found here was one fish, and it wasn't a particularly impressive one either. This lake was already depopulated, so I cannot fish all the fish from a fishless lake. But not all is lost. I spotted a tule plant, which is a material more efficient for making thatch roofs than regular dry grass. So I grabbed some of that, since I will have to look into improving my living quarters soon enough anyway. And when the day was coming to an end, I came back home from my little adventure. All the fishes you see here were caught in my own lake. Apart from that one. That one is from a fishing expedition. Yet, after cutting all those lake dwellers, I actually got a solid stack of fish meat, which means my blackguard hunger should be satiated for now. But apart from that, my clay works have been fired already. So now I have a whole collection of cooking pots that will let me cook better meals, as well as the molds needed for smelting copper. And that is good news, because by now I already have gathered 66 copper nuggets just from exploring the local area. The only issue is that the crucible, where the copper is smelted, must reach a specific temperature for the copper to melt. And for that I need to become an alchemist and magically turn firewood into charcoal. And that is done by making a bunch of axes and going to town on an unsuspecting local tree. But after I turned all that wood into firewood, I realized there's a better way to get all that wood fast, and it's just on the other side of the shore. So I swam to the redwood forest. and acquired my admittedly impressive target. So I started chopping, and after a moment or two, I was met with a very satisfying rain of wood. I guess having redwood forest right next door has its perks. So now I cut the wood up into firewood and set it up in a 3x3 pattern on the ground next to my house. And that of course wasn't all of it, since I have a massive surplus of that will probably last me months, hopefully. So now I grabbed some dirt and then put it all around my 3x3 firewood pile to isolate it from the air. And after that, I put a campfire at the very top, which I promptly ignited, and also covered it with dirt. Now the firewood inside should turn into charcoal over the next day or so. I have successfully created a charcoal kiln, but that also means I have a spare day with no chores. And that cannot be. So I decided to put my free time to good use, and I sent my dirt hut into a better dirt hut using a refined kind of dirt as building blocks. And for that I will use rammed earth, which is literally just compacted dirt that looks objectively much cooler. But I will also use a bunch of thatch roofs for that early civilization vibe. And the next morning I was hit with a temporal storm, so during this time I could not really do anything, since the world is now crawling with all sorts of strong creatures that would more than definitely kill me in seconds and end this run very soon. So instead I just bunkered myself up in dirt and waited for this nightmare to be over, which usually happens after a couple of minutes of absolutely trippy visual effects. But for me a bit longer than that, since I wanted to make sure all the stronger monsters wander away to their little monstrous evil homes. Although sometimes you have to help them. Oh my god. Well, that only proved my point that temporal storm monsters are a different breed. That drifter alone could end this playthrough if he hit me twice. But survival is not everything in life. We also got charcoal. So I spent some time shoveling it into my equipment, and almost 2 stacks of charcoal later, well, it should be enough to enter the copper age. But first I wanted to finish what I had set out to do beforehand. So I stole some dirt from the local dirt stockpiles, and then turned it into packed dirt by placing it in a 2x3 pattern in the crafting grid. And then I did the same to the packed dirt, turning it into rammed earth. And the best part about rammed earth is that there are several variants of it that can be swapped on the fly depending on my artistic whims. So I started demolishing my hut of dirt. I decided to level it to the ground completely before laying my first premium dirt blocks. I went with a 7x11 rectangle shape, because it looks villagey enough, and partly to commemorate a certain convenience store chain. And after that I added the roof, made mostly out of the tulle plant I gathered before, and then added a bunch of details, like those premium stick fences. But to manage the realistic smoke mod, I decided to cut away a small portion of the wall and turn it into a proper chimney, where the fireplace will go, smoking all the smoke away from the hut itself. And apart from that, I added a bunch of fence windows which can be opened, and replaced the dirt floor with my favorite early game block in the game, the mud bricks. This way I can claim that technically this building does pass as a house. And it is done. I like this early medieval kind of vibe. But my favorite part of this little simple hut is definitely the working chimney. It does what a chimney does, but in style. And having some space that isn't riddled with wild grass is pretty cool too. So now that I have more space to store things, I expanded my farm further. This way I used up all the extra soil I had on me and doubled the size of my potential food production area. And since I am already overdue for this, I finally put the crucible with some copper nuggets in the new fire pit. And through the power of hot burning charcoal, I started turning the copper into copper soup, ready to cast metal tools. But since hot metal soup is hot, I made some wooden tongs to spare my poor non-wooden hands from handling it personally. And after a few moments, the hot copper was ready to be cast into my pickaxe mold and my hammer mold. And after both of them cooled down, I will have my first metal tools. So to kill time, I decided to go for a little run around and pick up some seeds for my now double-sized farm. I found a variety of wild crops, including onions and stuff, but majority of what I found was actually flax. And that's actually quite new to me, because usually I struggle to find enough of it. So after I came back home and planted all the seeds in a chaotic manner, the hot metal is no longer so hot.
And they are ready.
which means now I can craft a copper hammer for turning copper ore into smeltable nuggets, and also a copper pickaxe to dig out the copper ore itself. And that means I have officially entered the copper age, and I haven't died from anything stupid just yet. So now I decided to have a run at all those copper spots I marked before. Wherever I found some copper bits on the surface, there should be copper ore beneath. So to get ready for a hard day of mining, I turned myself into a 5-star chef and made some porridge with berries. And after a moment of weirdly brain-scratching pot sounds, I had a nice steaming hot porridge, perfect for a mining run. So I hit the first spot where I found copper bits and dug straight down, and it didn't take long to immediately spot some fresh, bright orange metal. And not a small amount of it either, already in the first spot. So now I dug out all the copper here, then moved to the next spot and mined all the copper there as well. Then I defeated a bowthorn, which was defending the last spot I wanted to get some copper out of. But after that was done, I spent some time just mashing my pickaxe into the metal ore some more. Then I came back home and used my new copper hammer to mash all the chunks into nuggets using the secret McDonald's recipe. After that, I used the power of clay to make myself an anvil so I can actually use the copper nuggets for something. And while an anvil requires a lot of metal, it will be crucial when I need sophisticated tools that cannot be cast. But apart from that, I made a bunch of other clay things, like some vessels and ingot molds. And as usual, right before firing all that, I made some additional quality of life stuff, like those oil lamps that don't go out even underwater. So now I filled all the kilns with flammable stuff and flamed all over it. So now we are nicely polluting the air around the house. I had to search for another task now. And it just so happens that my farm will yield some crops very soon. So I decided that it is the right time to build a nice medieval village-inspired dugout cellar on the side of my house. So I got to digging, and my main goal was to make it look as realistic as possible. The cellar room itself will be directly below the house, and while it won't be super spacious, it will give me enough room to store all my food and keep it fresh. But I also have to remember that building during high rift activity periods can be a bit dangerous.
Oh my god, they spawned out of nowhere. Oh! No! There was a... okay. I need to change those doors. Oh.
So I just had to wait out all those grey Muppets playing for time. And when it was safe to go out, I just gave them the knife special. But overall the building was going good, from adding little details like fences to making pathways from dirt and stone. And the underground cellar is done. Now I will have a place to store all my future grain, even if it doesn't technically have doors yet. And building for like 2 days also means the pottery is done cooking. So I put all the storage vessels in the cellar, stacking the bonuses for food longevity. But I also had some of those new lamps. So I finally cooked some fat in a pot, rendering it, which is a new thing, and put it in the lamps to make them go all shiny. Which means I have now a light source that can be mounted on walls and will never go out. And the first place was, of course, the cellar, since mobs tend to spawn in those pretty often. But apart from the lamps and vessels, we also have the anvil and ingot molds. So I cooked up some copper in the fire pit, and this time we'll need quite a bit of it, because an anvil is definitely not cheap to make. It's a massive block of metal, after all. Now we wait for it all to cool down, including the ingots, so I can become the smith I always wanted to be. And so I went for a little hunt to kill time. Again, even when I'm not using my left arm, the hunger is still haunting me at every waking moment. That and the goats. This is the second or maybe third time I am almost dying to goats.
It's still so hard to fight those goats, dude.
And when I got home, I had to cook up all the meat I had, even if I'm playing jazz from hunger damage. But the wait was worth it. A stew made from meat. A meat stew. 100% meat. Day 20 started with me emancipating my anvil, so I hugged it tenderly and lovingly, because now I am making some cobblestone using stone and clay, and then, from cobblestone, a forge, which has a nice new model now, and my small blacksmith set is assembled. For now, it resides inside my hut, but later I'll probably build a separate place for it. But now it is more important to focus on the essentials. So I heated up my 2 copper ingots, and the first thing I decided to make was a saw to ascend into the plank age, which should be its own age, given how much trouble it takes to get to it. And combining it with a stick, we get a proper saw. And the next thing, given that we are playing permadeath, I decided to make a sword. Because as a blackguard, I do get bonuses to melee damage. And also I am tired of almost dying to goats all the time, so I put the saw to good use now, making some planks from pine, and then proper doors that don't break down when I need to run away from monsters. That brings tears to my eyes every time. And the same goes for the cellar doors, which seal the room and actually make it work now. Food expiration dates are just numbers, after all, and this way I successfully made them bigger. Cellar is working as intended now, so now I grabbed some of the few crops that were ready to be harvested, and now in the cellar I also had my first batch of fresh veggies that will stay fresh for much longer. But I still don't have anything to protect myself from getting hit, so I settled on the leather armor, since it doesn't increase the hunger rate at all when worn. To prepare myself for crafting that armor, I first need to get some barrels, because in those I will be able to turn animal hides into leather. But I also crafted a bucket from a bunch of planks and some flax to fill up the barrels later with water. But I need one more thing to make the leather operation possible, and that thing is a quern, to grind limestone rocks into lime. So to craft one, I first found some peridotite stone on the face of that mountain. I needed stone blocks, so I had to mine in a specific way to get them. By digging everything around a stone block, you actually make it drop. Then at home, I made a chisel through some precise smithing. Combining all the ingredients, plus some sticks, made a quern. And this beautiful thing will enable me to do so many cool things later too. But first I had to get some limestone, which thankfully is abundant throughout the area to the east. Usually it takes days to find it, but this time I got lucky from the start. So I spent some time mining it, because leather making is very limestone hungry. And when I brought it home, I ground it all up in this 4-dimensional quern, turning it into lime. Then I filled all the barrels with 50 liters of water each using the bucket I crafted earlier. But since it was getting late, my brain switched off and I got distracted by maple seeds and the fact that if you throw them, they do actually spin and are affected by wind.
There's no way. That is so cool. Yeah, oh my god, it went so far.
And the next morning I thought of some early drifters and proceeded to cut down some trees, specifically oaks because they are necessary for leather making. And after that I added a bunch of new barrels and filled them up with water as well. And then added the ground limestone into some of the barrels, turning the mixture into lime water. And to the rest of the barrels I added 5 oak logs each, because after sealing, the water inside will turn into weak tannin after 24 hours. Later I will add 5 more oak logs to 1 or 2 barrels to make a batch of strong tannin, the final step in leather making. Hides go from soaking in lime water to soaking in weak tannin, and then soaking in strong tannin, turning them into leather. But I completely forgot about the most important part of leather making. So, the hides. So as soon as the morning hit, I decided to go on a hunting expedition. Yet again. Since most animals are east, and I find myself swimming to the lake quite often, I decided for the first time ever to build a raft. And it's actually surprisingly easy. And apart from the raft, an oar to make it steerable.
Oh my god, it's so cool. Oh, that's so nice.
A raft is a nice addition that will play a role later as well. But for now I used it to get to the shore faster, because now I could finally take revenge on all the goats in the area under the pretense that I was doing it only for the hides and meat. But I wasn't discriminating about the killing. I was swinging my falcons at anything that moved. Boinking down goats, boars or deer with just a few hits. Blackguard's melee damage bonus is actually satisfying and useful at the same time. And after an entire day of slaying goats, I started making my way home. A raft was indeed a really good idea after all. And the hunt itself proved to be very fruitful. I managed to get some hides, but also 61 meat, which is more meat than most people see in their life, apart from 2 career paths I can think of. So the next day I put the hides in lime water to soak. After 20 hours they should be done. And my tannin barrels are also done, so I put 5 more oaks in 2 of them to turn them into the strong tannin. And this way leather production has officially started. Now I just have to replenish whatever needs replenishing from time to time. So now I cooked up some food for provisions, and I went out into the wilderness to grab some more copper. Hitting copper nodes that I have marked before is pretty easy, and it nets you quite a bit of extra copper that can be used later in bronze making too. But this time I needed the copper for something else entirely. When I got home, I boinked all the copper chunks into 2 stacks of nuggets, and then smelted them into copper ingots. Then I promptly put them on the forge. And from the forge ingots, I made a couple of things. Firstly, a prospecting pickaxe. This tool will let me find ores by stabbing the ground with it. It's going to be useful a lot and pretty soon. And the next thing I made is more of a quality of life thing. Scissors. Those can be used to get vastly more sticks out of trees, so no more scavenging for hours just to fill up a kiln. And after that, I made a scythe, which is basically scissors, but for grass. This thing makes gathering dry grass for kilns and other things a breeze. And lastly, I made a bunch of nails. And those can be combined with planks to make my very first chests, saving me from the headache of proper inventory management. So yeah, we have several new things here now. But all that smithing took enough time for all the hides to be already lime soaked, so I scraped them with a knife in a crafting grid, and then put them in weak tannin to soak for a bit more. And this little maneuver will cost us 3 days of waiting. And the next morning was a wet one. So wet, in fact, that friendly-looking entities were actively trying to get inside my hut. But rain is not so bad, since it makes the crops grow faster, like the ones here, ready for harvest. So I gathered everything that was fully grown using the power of my empty hands. And so now I can confidently say that the hunger battle has been won, and I finally have enough food to not feel like I have to go out hunting all the time. And on top of that, I finally got some flax, which can prove to be useful even now, because I can turn it into flax twines and then into linen. And after grabbing some dry grass using the scythe, I was able to finally make myself a proper bed. Days of sleeping on the floor made out of mud bricks are over. But then I noticed something unrelated. Recent rainfalls are a bit problematic after all. Rain gets into my chimney and extinguishes my fire pit. That's an embarrassing design flaw. That means that Mother Nature is actively trying to make me unable to cook meals. So to fix this, I decided to put grated trapdoors as filter. It doesn't seem to be letting the rain in, yet it does let the fire pit smoke through. A perfect solution for the problem. And since crafting trapdoors always gives you 2, I put the second one as my little chimney doors for the vibes. And now that everything is fixed, and I am still waiting only for the leather, I decided to go out and do some prospecting to search for tin. And literally the first thing I found was ultra high copper deposit right next to my house, which is more than welcome. But other than that, I spent a lot of time trying to find any decent reading for tin, or cassiterite. I prospected all over the place, but ultimately I managed to get a high tin reading right next to air-exposed tin ore, and I've never seen it out like this. Well, I am not complaining. Free tin is free tin, especially next to a really good reading. So I dug it all out using my trusty copper pickaxe. And this whole vein net me 31 chunks of tin. And after coming back home, I turned it into 62 tin nuggets. So while it might seem like a small number, it's actually more than enough to make a substantial amount of bronze if added in correct proportions in the crucible, combining it with copper. So now my bronze is slowly cooking in the oven. All I can do is wait for it to be ready. So naturally I tended to my farm and planted some new crops in the farm's bold spot. And when I finished, the bronze was already yummy and liquidy. So I poured it into molds. And after all of it cooled down, I took it out of the molds to make some tools. But then I got interrupted. I heard some weird noises coming from the cellar. And apparently my oil lamp didn't help with monsters after all. And I had an uninvited guest in my cellar mockingly dancing. So I gently put him to sleep. And after that was done, I put sticks on my bronze tools. And now officially I have entered the Bronze Age of history, and that might be the fastest progression from copper to bronze I have ever done. But now I decided it is time to improve my base a bit, or maybe expand it. So I spent some time now processing my bronze, and making all the tools that might come in handy with the renovations. I spent quite a bit of time just making tools basically. But after I was done, I had a full set of bronze tools, including a sword for self-defense. And in the morning, the next day, I started tending to my leather making barrels. I put the already tannin-soaked hides into the strong tannin now. Next time I see those, I will have leather. But after that I started deconstructing the primitive firing kiln construction. I wanted to build a place specifically designed for firing clay and other things. A firing hut, so to speak. So I started from experimenting with the shape. I wanted it to look like a workshop at first, but then I deviated from that idea and I went with a circular shape for that Bronze Age village vibe. All of it of course made out of rammed earth, which for some reason I just kind of like the look of. Then I started doing the roof, which is not easy when your hut is circular, and it takes a lot of grass too. But after I had the method more or less figured out, the roof was building itself. After that I filled up the inside with more rammed earth, so it's more consistent with the rest of the village, all while leaving a tiny hole at the very top to let the smoke from the kilns escape. And after a moment, I had a nice looking firing hut that is designed to lead the smoke from the bottom to the opening at the top. Not to mention it has plenty of spots to fire stuff, so I'll never have a problem with that. So now I made a bunch of clay things to test it out. I made some shingles, since I've never made them before, and I wondered how a clay shingle roof looks like. But I also made some crockpots. I always make them and never use them, so let's fix that. Although I'll probably forget about them anyway. I put them in the holes and covered them with all the things you cover unfinished clay things with. And then I put a torch to all of them. And now my firing hat does what it was born to do, and it is looking very villagey while doing so. The smoke is going through the ventilation hole in the roof without issues, so that I don't suffocate when I enter for some reason. And the fires inside give off a safe OSHA regulated glow. And all that while I do crazy cinematic shots of the whole experience. But I wasn't done with the base renovations just yet. I chose a spot on a hill just behind my house and started preparations for building. This time I wanted to make a proper smithy that any smith would be proud of. So first I grabbed a bunch of stone, and this time mostly shale, which is much darker than the rammed earth I've used so far. And then, after some nightly traveling, I dug out some more clay to make it all happen. And in the morning I took a small break for a nice cozy meal, and then went straight back into building. This wasn't anything too complicated. I wanted to have a storage room for all the ingots and stuff, and a smithy attached to it. And hey, my shingles were done cooking just in time, so I made a bunch of clay roofs, and then put them at the very top, where you know, roof usually goes. But funny enough, I don't actually like shale cobble that much, so instead I opted for more rammed earth to keep the village stylistically cohesive. And the smithy was taking shape slowly, but I still didn't like it. So I took out my frustrations on the locals, and then removed the new clay shingle roof. And funny enough, I replaced it too, with freaking thatch roofing. I tried to be different, but my inner medieval guy won. So now I have a nice smithy that still lacks some detail work, but it will come in time when I'm gonna actually be using it. And while the building on its own is pretty simple, I like how my hut base turned into a small village base now. I started in several dirt huts and moved here to make a small community, although I don't have anyone living here. Maybe one day, if they add hireable NPCs or something. So for now, the base renovations are done. Time to go back to progression and goal chasing, especially that the base building took, long enough for the leather to be finally done. Now I have a nice, very impressive stack of leather just waiting to be used for something. Like those leather backpacks. But time will come for those too. So since this is hardcore, I decided to use all this leather to make the full leather armor first after all. I did not want to risk losing my life to something stupid, and believe me, this thing will prove more than useful later. So now I have all the parts of the armor, and I am ready for anything, as long as it's not too damaging. Because while this armor has the perk of not increasing the hunger rate, it is not that protective. But since I'm rocking those early game baskets and I decided against the backpacks for now, I crafted a bunch of linen sacks as a remedy for my poor equipment space situation. And that definitely makes things a bit easier now. So now that I have more inventory space and an armor, I started being slightly more cocky in my pursuits. I was now able to more or less comfortably fight with animals and not poop my pants whenever I saw a predator. So now I cooked. Literally, I had to make some provisions, because in the morning I grabbed some more horsetail for healing and a bunch of raw veggies too, and I decided to go into the wilderness, farther than ever before, and explore the world. I have some very specific mods for dungeons, and I really wanted to check them out finally. So who's to say what I'm going to find? So I traveled until I noticed the fishless lake I got disappointed by last time. This is as far as I ever got traveling west. Anything beyond is uncharted territory. So I grabbed some cattail and crafted myself a primitive shield. Just in case, I will need some extra protection from whatever I find. And so I traveled, exploring the wild lands never explored by me before. And on my way I did spot a couple of ruins, but they were vanilla ruins, and rather disappointing with the loot, regardless. This is, until with the corner of my eye, I noticed a weird looking structure over the hill. That was a house.
Wait, what is this?
And when I approached closer, it resembled a house even more. Well, I guess it's safe to say this is not a vanilla ruin thing. I think I found the first modded ruin in this playthrough, and a very cozy looking one at that. So I entered and dispatched the evil within, mostly locust spiders. But I also found the owner of the house. Ignore the big metal spike going through his chest, he's fine. I explored the house a bit and tried looking for any loot worth a penny, but apart from some lore books, I could not find anything too exciting.
Ah, it's just chiseled block. Okay, I thought it was actual cheese. There doesn't seem to be anything else, really. Bones.
So for now, I just locked myself off using some dirt and went to sleep. I guess I am staying a night in a haunted looking house as my first real adventure. And when the morning sun started seeping in through the cracks and crevices of this old building, I noticed an untouched loot chest I must have omitted somehow. And yeah, inside we have the real treasure, fashion. So now that I am blinked out of my mind, I can continue. So I proceeded going west, occasionally hunting for game to make sure I keep my protein up. But then on my map I noticed an unusual looking hill. So I killed one more boar and proceeded to explore the area. And when I finally got through this little redwood forest, I noticed the thing I've been looking for this entire time, I guess. This just might be the biggest ruin I have ever seen in Vintage Story. And in prime time too, since I've been traveling for a while now. The first thing I spotted was a bunch of graves right at the entrance to set the vibe, I guess. But then I saw a shiver and bravely jumped into combat. And as it turned out, this was a bellhead shiver. So the strongest variant of that monster.
Oh god. Oh god, okay, he hit me for like half my HP. Through everything. Oh no. That's a bad idea. That was a bad idea.
So I bravely retreated and hid in the local lake, bandaging half of my body. This playthrough could have ended right here. I very cautiously came back, staying on maximum alert, but ultimately the shiver ran off somewhere, I guess. I did not see it anymore around the ruins. So I entered and started exploring more confidently now, looting whatever the dead don't need. This place looks like some sort of a small fort, or maybe a church. Hard to tell because, it's a ruin. I tried to explore everything, but apart from a lore book, there wasn't too much stuff going on. This was a story about a boy who ran away from his chores and hid in a cave somewhere deep in the forest. But that's about it. I went down now to check out the underground entrance that this shiver used to guard. And here I found some dungeon cells, which means that the church guest was probably far off. Here I also found a lore book about a very beautiful castle known as Glimmer Shield and a wealthy family that lived in it. And from the looks of it, this might be where I currently am, after all. But apart from that, I couldn't find anything else of interest. I walked around the castle itself and, discouraged by the pitch black night, I decided to retreat to the front again. And here I was standing in front of the graves again, which may or may not be the wealthy family that lived here, according to that book. And the keyword is wealthy, because I dug out their graves with utmost respect looking for treasures. But ultimately I only found some bony soil, which might be useful if I ever decide to punt through it. But now I started walking back home. Almost dying and still looting up a castle is more than enough for me for now. I camped next to a small lake to spend the night, and when the morning came, I cooked all the meat I had for breakfast. And while seeking even more snacks, I saw a cranberry bush. I wasn't aware because of my lack of reading skills, but the reworked bushes now have traits, such as this one needing fewer nutrients to grow. So out of curiosity, I cut it with a knife, and I got a nice little sapling inheriting its traits. And that's a new thing, meaning that if done correctly, I could probably build a small farm of bushes with the best traits, collecting them like Pokemon. So while I traveled home, I gathered a bunch of bushes with different traits. Some have positive traits, like yielding more fruit, some don't have traits at all, and some have several negative ones. So now I just walked straight home, traveling hundreds of blocks. Thankfully, this adventure wasn't as long as the one still coming, and after a moment, I made it home to my little medieval village. It is good to be finally home, especially when you put all the things you stole from a wealthy castle family as decorations in your house. Especially important being the torch holders, because having access to fire easily is pretty important in all my buildings now. But now I flattened a small chunk of terrain right in front of my smithy. Here I decided to plant all my new bushes. I surrounded them with some wattle fences, both for the vibes and to protect them from animals. And now I have a small berry garden. We'll see if they ripen in time. But now I had to resume all the stuff going on in my base. So for the day, I hunted a bunch of animals, ground up some more lime on a quern from the 4th dimension, just to put some new hides in there. A whole day of work just to get this stuff back up and running. In the morning of day 40, I plopped some clay together to make an anvil mold, and then put it in the firing hat to harden. I wanted to make a tin bronze anvil, which is the first anvil that lets you work iron, my next big step. And while this thing is getting smoked, I started looking for more copper in the ultra high reading I got before. It wasn't super hard to find it, of course. There is a massive amount of copper here, pretty much right at my home's doorstep. But now the next target, the high tin reading across the lake. And when I got to the place, the whole sky turned red, from the sunset, I guess. Kind of cool, but also ominous as hell. But it didn't stop me from trying to triangulate the position of tin, which happens to be confusing for some reason since I couldn't find it reliably. And when I did find it, it was rather patchy and going weirdly diagonally. And when I got home, I made some tin bronze in my fireplace. And yes, I am doing all that during a temporal storm. Being absolutely sieged by an army of drifters is fun, but only when they can't get in. So, I was kind of stuck in my hut for a while. When the storm finally passed, and everything went back to normal, I dispatched some of the remaining drifters as a sign of disrespect. But more importantly, I poured hot tin bronze metal in my new and ready anvil mold. And this thing will let me ascend into even higher dimension of human consciousness. The Iron Age. But before all that glory, first I had to tend to my farm. Flax is going to be important later. I started searching for magnetite, or any other tite, in the area. All I found were very poor readings for limonite, a type of iron, and magnetite, another type of iron but different. So I decided to go for the objectively better reading of magnetite for now, and try to pinpoint the mother lode. I started prospecting all over the place. Even fell into a cave and explored it for a while, which I don't usually do because caves are dangerous and scary. But I did manage to loot a small dungeon, where I found some gears. Yet I could not get a good reading for magnetite anywhere here. I was getting mostly poor readings or losing track of the ore altogether. And after a couple of days, and a prospecting pick or two later, I managed to get a good grasp of where we stand with the ore density on this map. And while it looks cool, this chart was paid for with pain and tears. So I decided to start digging down in the obvious center, and surprisingly, I found readings for the nearby magnetite quite quickly. And after using the short scans of the pick, I managed to find the ore, a medium quality magnetite in andesite. It's an andesite to behold. So naturally, I spent some time cinematically mining the iron. And as per usual, iron veins are huge. I do not expect to need to find another one for a while. I even set up a camp right outside where I was cooking meat to not starve to death. A small mining camp. But yeah, this was an endless supply of iron. On every wall, a couple of blocks at least. A massive vein, like the top of a Snickers bar. The first iron shopping haul brought me about 2.5 stacks of chunks. And at home, after breaking them down, that turned into 5 stacks of iron nuggets. But to smelt iron ore, we can't just throw it into a fire pit anymore. I need fire clay bricks to make a special firing kiln. But first, I need to make a bunch of fire clay, which is any clay plus some cooked and ground up flint. So I put all the flint I had to the fire pit and let it cook. That's going to take a moment. And in the meanwhile, I cut down some more redwood trees and filled up more charcoal kilns to make more charcoal. I will need a ton of it when it comes to iron working. And the next day, while I was wandering around looking for more flint, I spotted cobblestone on the ground, which meant an uncovered dungeon. And here, I indeed found a small structure in the middle of a desert, where I found some cool clothes. And that hood and the mask kind of made me look like a black bird, or a medieval plague doctor, which is probably more accurate. Well, a random clothing boutique dungeon always is a nice find. And after that, the charcoal was ready. so I used the power of flint shovel to dig it out, since I was too lazy to smith a bronze one. And hey, the flint is still cooking. I guess I didn't have enough charcoal before, and the fire died before anything cooked, so that resets the progress a bit. But whenever some flint was cooked, I immediately ground it up and turned it into white powder. And then, whenever available, I was using it to make the first fire clay. And after a while of crafting bricks from it, I had a good amount ready to be fired. So now, in the firing hut, I put all the fire clay bricks in the kilns and covered them with all the flammable materials I had. And after igniting them, this was the largest firing fire clay bricks that the firing hut has ever seen. And every time, it looks so cool too. So, since I am just waiting for things to get done, I tended to my farm, more with the scythe. And hey, the fields are clear for the very first time ever. A whole harvest has been done. And that means I have so much food, I almost don't have space to keep it. From all kinds of grains to stacks of vegetables. But apart from that, a hell of a lot of flax. And that's when the firing hut stopped smoking. And that means that my fire clay bricks are ready. So I picked them out of the kilns and made two important things out of them. Some bloomery bases and the chimneys I will put on top. Because those gentlemen here are going to smelt so much iron for me. So I put 120 iron nuggets in each, and then 6 charcoal in each. And after putting them to the torch, they were firing my iron nuggets into iron blooms. But while it looks cool and very smithy-like, this will take a solid couple of in-game hours to smelt. So now, I checked up on my leather production, and the next batch is ready. So, I made some leather backpacks out of it, to improve my inventory space even further. And having so much space is going to be very helpful. And soon. During the night, I set off on a small hunting adventure. And this time, the goal was to kill some time before I get my iron, but also to get some more leather for my future plans. So I spent some time hacking and slashing all the goats I felt so much resentment towards. And while I don't want to use the G word, I culled their population in a significant way all around the eastern plains and northern mountains beyond the lake. And that whole thing, while fun and rewarding mentally, apart from some hides, also gave me more meat than I have ever seen. But apart from that, I also tended to my farm and replanted everything from grounds up. This particular zone is rather warm, so I don't expect a crippling winter. And after all that, the bloomeries quit smoking, which is a very impressive thing to do. And after demolishing them as a reward, I got a bunch of iron blooms, which have to be processed to be useful. So I grabbed my new bronze anvil that was just waiting for this occasion, and put it inside the smithy for now. And then I started heating the blooms, which admittedly needed to be very hot to be efficiently workable. All while the forge on its own doesn't produce that much heat. But I tried making iron ingots anyway, and, as expected, the process was painful, since the blooms cooled down really fast on the anvil itself, since the forge couldn't get them to high enough temperatures to begin with. So, a new update problem requires a new update solutions. I decided I needed bellows, which will let me heat things up in the forge to a much higher temperature. So, I heated up some residue bronze from the old crucible, made it into ingots, and then made some nails from them on the anvil by hitting them repeatedly with a hammer. And, using some of my leather, I managed to make the bellows quite quickly. And since the setup for the smithy started getting big, I decided to move everything outside. And of course, since I can't focus on one thing at a time, I remodeled the entire outside of the smithy too, by adding a bunch of stone fences and a hanging roof. And admittedly, the smithy looks much more smithy-like now. So since the whole setup is here, I was able to use the new bellows to make the blooms heat up to a proper temperatures now. And working the iron blooms is now possible without constant reheating of the material. And my first iron ingot. We are officially in the age of iron, and much sooner than ever before. Yet there was another problem. I noticed that tongs for handling hot stuff now have a durability, and mine are running pretty low. So I decided to craft another recently added item, metal tongs. In this case, iron ones. And while I tried another new thing, cooling down the hot stuff in a barrel full of water, I noticed that something else has happened. On accident, I actually quenched the tool and made it stronger through yet another new mechanic in Vintage Story, the tempering and quenching mechanics. So I read about it in the handbook, and apparently you can quench a tool however many times you want and improve its stats, under the risk of the tool shattering each time with increasing odds. So, Minecraft's enchantment system, but with gambling. So I decided to make an iron pickaxe. Then, straight from the anvil, I quenched it in cool water. This gives the tool plus 10% to power, but also increases the chance of shattering during the next quenching to 10%. So, I heated up the pickaxe head once again to a quenchable temperature, about 900 degrees Celsius, and then cooled it down again, rapidly. Now the stats are boosted by 18%, and shatter chance jumped to 15. So of course, curious of what will happen, I continued to heat it up, and I did it all over again. Now, this pickaxe has a boost of 25%. That's one overpowered pickaxe by vintage story standards. And the next thing I wanted to do is tempering, which decreases the chance of the tool shattering. And that means I had to bring the tool head to between 550 and 700 Celsius. And then let it cool down in the air, slowly. But of course I can't read, so I tried to do it in a barrel and I got confused.
And we tempered it once? No? Did I do something wrong? How do you temper?
So well, I just played around with the tempering and quenching mechanics for a solid moment. I let the pickaxe head rest for the day, but I found it very engaging, having to work on one tool for so long to squeeze extra stats out of it. That makes smithing tools a bit more personal. And the next day, when I checked up on the tool, it was indeed tempered, reducing the shatter chance by 4% and the general power of the tool by about 2%. So playing with the shatter chance is not without trade-offs. But yet another thing we can do is cover the tool head in fire clay, and then quenching it will actually improve the durability of the tool rather than mining speed. So I heated up the metal head once again and tried quenching it with fire clay.
Don't break. No! No! I worked on this piece for like 2 days. No!
The masterpiece I worked so hard for, gone because of gambling with shatter chances. Well, at least now I know how this new stuff works. So now I started making all the iron tools I could ever need, and the idea was that I would quench each one of them about 3 times to squeeze out the bonus stats out of all of them without too much risk. This whole smithing rework is amazing, and while it does make smithing longer if you want to have better gear, it's also extremely satisfying. And each tool feels very personal. And after a lot of work, and honestly real-life hours of smithing and chilling in my smithy, I can proudly present my set of full iron tools, and all of them with increased stats through the new smithing mechanics. These are my children, but my work wasn't done. I wanted to have more iron for the future projects I intend to work on. So in the following days I repeated the iron mining and repeated the bloomery iron smelting, and of course worked all the blooms into ingots over time. I even added a new second forge to keep stuff at consistent temperatures, and my iron ingot pile was slowly but satisfyingly growing. The day 60 was the day when I had more or less enough iron to do all the things I wanted to do. So this small pile might not look impressive, but it will do more than well. First thing I wanted to make is a small water wheel, but unfortunately I do not have any fast flowing water near my house, even though it is a new thing I wanted to check out. So instead I decided to approach automation in a different way, by using the new large windmill stuff, including this bad boy. A metal windmill rotor that can support the large windmill sails. So I took 12 ingots from my pile and heated them nicely in my forges and started making all the necessary parts, like heavy iron brackets, which are indeed quite heavy, and a bunch of iron rods. Then I debarked some redwood logs using hammer and an axe, and then, using saw, turned them into support beams. And this way, we have the metal windmill rotor ready for action, and it is a chunky gentleman. But now, while wood is not a problem, I did need to run a bunch of resin and fat runs for all the machinery pieces, so that's kind of my goal now. And hey, I two-shot drifters with my brand new thrice quenched super duper falx of iron. I call that revenge for all the butt slapping those guys do. But yeah, I went out into the wilderness now to search for fat first. And having all that iron on me kind of made me cocky now. But I guess rightfully so. I can take on whatever this game throws at me now. And that's why I wanted to get some fat from the ultimate predator. So I started looking for some bears. Yet, whenever you need them, they are nowhere to be found. Instead, I did call the local population of wolves, it seems. So when I got home, I cooked all the fat I gathered to render it for the machinery. But I can always get more. At least resin is not a problem, since I live right next to a pine forest. Resin grows literally quite everywhere here. So, focusing on fat is my main goal. They call me the Ozempic man. And while fighting wolves is fun, when there is very little risk of dying, I still wanted to get that freaking bear. And after some time of wandering around, I finally managed to spot one. A black one. So I threw myself into the jaws of danger, hoping for an Avengers level threat fight. And he's gone. That was kind of sad actually. He just kind of collapsed and died. All sad like a sack of potatoes. I realized that as a blackguard with an iron fox, I might be slightly overpowered now, especially since I have so much food that there is basically no class downsides now. Hunger is no longer a threat. So now, at home, I started looking into making all the mechanisms. And after a moment, I had more or less everything I needed. So now I went out to grab all the materials for my build. So I grabbed some limestone cobble because it's nice and bright, some grass for the roofs, clay for something or other, I don't remember, and also oak wood, because it's the best kind of wood in any game. And now I had all the materials necessary for my windmill. So in the morning, I made some space above my village. And well, this is where my future windmill will be, the center of my village basically, and the most important and visible part of it. So I started making the general 7x7 shape from limestone cobble, and then added some of that roof I live by. This is the best kind of roof, and I am unwilling to change my mind. Thatch for life. Then I used some rammed earth as flooring, because rammed earth is the block of choice of this playthrough. And of course we can't forget about the windmill tower itself, that is going to be standing tall and proud above the village. But the detail work needs one more tool I forgot to make, and that is a crowbar. Also just recently added to the game, and thanks to it, I will be able to remove wooden support beams from my build much easier, because detail work is the best kind of work, and I like to spend some time just making different medieval looking patterns from the beams. And after adding the beams to literally every nook and cranny of this windmill, I did the unthinkable, and made the very tip not from thatch roof, but actually from oak. Then, in the tower itself, I had to set up all the mechanisms so they correctly spin, like this huge gear that connects to the rotor that through some other smaller gears and so on. Then I put the metal windmill rotor outside. This is where the windmill will actually do the winding and milling. But the rotor needs the sails, so I spent an atrocious amount of flax to make the big ones. Mostly because they are new and also recently added to the game. And then I added them to the windmill rotor outside to make it go all spinny and stuff. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a proper mill that doesn't look half bad. Still, there's some stuff I would add to it, and I probably will, but having a proper windmill made out of iron this early in the game is new to me. Last time it took me 2 episodes to get to any automation, and now here we go. And yeah, this particular mill was made mostly for the quern, since milling limestone and grain can take literal days if done by hand. I didn't feel like I actually needed the smithy automation for now. So yeah, it's a windmill and does what windmills do. I took a lot of cinematic shots of it, so I don't know what else to say to prolong it and use all of them. And yeah, the quern is indeed milling things, weather permitting of course. So now I decided to add a little bakery thing next to the mill actually. So I did that. It's a very simple oak plank hut that looks like a little attachment to the mill itself, because I wanted to make sure that I have separate place to bake bread and use grain in various ways, like alcohol making for instance. So I put some barrels here for that reason, and then made 2 ovens from fire clay. And after rotating them properly, I officially had a small bakery as an attachment to my windmill. So now I put some of my freshly ground grains into the barrels, making some spelt ale in 14 days. And apart from that, I also combined water with the flour to make dough. And that's very important now, because I put some firewood into the ovens to preheat them, and when that was done, I was able to bake my own bread in them, using that dough. And that is the best thing ever, because bread is actually a food that is perfect for travel. But not this kind of bread, more like the bread that you put in the oven for too long and forget about it. So a charred bread, which has a doubled shelf lifetime and will not rot for a very long time, perfect for traveling, and just one small bite will fill the stomach of a grown man. Well, not really, but close enough. So now I just sat and burned some bread on purpose. A weird thing to do, but there is a long road ahead of me, and I wanted to be prepared. Constantly making new bread, and constantly waiting for more flour to be made automatically. And surprisingly pretty fast too. And just a reminder, it is technically winter already. But since we seem to have settled pretty far south, the winter is actually a nuisance more than a threat. Crops like flax still grow perfectly fine too, and while it did feel like maybe I'm missing out on some cool wintry survival, I was kind of happy that this time the weather is different than my last playthroughs. Okay, but after a solid couple of hours of baking, I had almost 4 stacks of burnt bread ready for action. So since the food is more or less set, I decided to use some more iron to equip myself even better. So I made a bunch of iron spears, and played around with quenching to boost the damage, especially that thrown weapons deal less damage since I play as a blackguard, who gets a penalty to ranged weaponry. But apart from spears, I decided to make something rather special, and I wanted to take my time with it, to make sure it is properly quenched several times before it's ready. So, after a bunch of work, I made my very first blackguard short sword. A weapon only craftable by blackguards, and boosted several times over to achieve a glorious 6.9 damage per hit. So now I was more than prepared for what's to come, including some slightly better bandages, which might prove to not be enough. You will see. But I had one more goal, one more thing I wanted to build before going into the jaws of boss fighting. So I started building a little fisherman's hut. The idea was that if I come back alive, I will spend the rest of my days fishing and doing the new taxidermy stuff to put my fishing trophies on the walls as decorations. So, after a bit of work and detailing, there it was. My brand new fishing hut, ready for fishing, I guess. I like how it turned out generally. I went for simplicity with every build so far, and this is a nice little addition to the village, including this empty wall, waiting to be filled with some stuffed fish. So, since I had some more leather to spare, I made a bunch of wall mounts, and then put them on the walls to signal my intentions to the Vintage Story gods, so I could survive through the archives in hardcore Vintage Story. So yeah, I have a thing to come back to now. I better not mess it up. I started the day by fixing up my armor. Fighting all those wolves and stuff already took a toll on it. Then I entered my hut and grabbed a tin bronze pick. It's going to be necessary soon. After leaving my house, I went north to find a treasure hunter merchant. I will give him the pick and he will mark the boss dungeon, Resonance Archives, on my map. And it didn't take long to spot one of the new merchant huts. And after entering it and talking to the wise-looking bald guy, it turned out that I am actually quite lucky and it is the treasure hunter, literally on the first merchant hut I spotted. So I gave him the pick and got myself a map. And that map marked the location of the Resonance Archives on my own map, which by some chance was also north, the direction I was going in anyway while looking for the merchant, although admittedly much further, into the deep north. So my adventure has begun. Can I defeat the boss of the archives in permadeath Vintage Story? Well, I sure hope I can, because if I can't, this whole setup is going to be quite awkward. Travel took me quite a long time, and the nights are a dangerous time to travel.
Yeah, damn, I got scared. Ooh.
Thankfully, the new short sword does its job pretty well, but there was also another problem, which is the temperature. The deeper north I went, the colder it got. And the next morning, after traveling through some hills, I managed to spot an ominous mountain range that looked awfully familiar. This is where the X is on the map. The mountain range where the archives reside, and this is, as usual, quite an impressive sight. So I approached the mountains and gathered a bunch of soil from underneath the place. I wanted to completely skip the mountain climbing and just built myself a huge dirt pillar to get to the top. That plan seemed to work pretty well, and I managed to reach the very top of the mountains quite easily thanks to my deep soily pockets. And the sight was truly impressive, but one misstep and my save file is gone. So now I started looking for the doors to the archives. And with prior experience, I knew that they could be hidden quite literally anywhere, and I wasn't wrong. It was hard to spot them, but the entry part of the dungeon is hidden away in a small crevice of the mountain. And the heavy iron doors look just as inviting as ever. And I am not going to lie, I am stressing a bit about this. This place could end my run right here, and I've grown to like my little village. So, I started making my way down, and the first thing I did was almost die. Great start.
Oh my god, what a great entry.
But I did manage to get to the bottom more or less safely after all. Now to the easy part. I knew the layout and I knew the enemies, so I started carving my way through the dungeon. First, I entered the engineering room. I got some coal from the coal room and put it in the furnace to power this whole place up. And as usual, a haunting experience, when all the machinery moves yet again, after who knows how many years since it was built. I left the engineering room and dispatched some more drifters, some of them more unlucky than others. I made my way to the Bell workshop, the next big bus stop on my way to defeating the big man himself. I squeezed through the tight corridors of the workshop and woke up the Bell enemy. This is a place where I died many times before, so I knew to instantly focus the guy with all my might. And thanks to the short sword, this went surprisingly smooth this time. I proceeded further into the depths and got to the workshop itself. And here, I picked up the big glowy gear. Now I came back to the engineering room and put the gear in its place. And after that I went to the commons room. Here I had a bunch of enemies to dispatch, including some locusts, which this time only take one hit to die. Usually, I go through this place first, but with some experience I know it's not necessary. In the room, I found a ladder in the well. So I went down into the flooded cave. Thankfully, an oil lamp doesn't go out underwater, unlike a torch that some crazy people take to the archives. I would never do such a thing. Here, I walked up the stairs and went straight to the translocator room. This is a part I'm actually quite scared of. Here I used one of the translocators to teleport straight to the mines. I got greeted by corrupted drifters. They deal quite a bit of damage, so I had to be careful. And same goes for the saw blade locust that always hides in this particular corridor. And after dispatching some more drifters, this time nightmare ones, which I think are even stronger, I managed to find the right turn and get to the pump. So I grabbed the pump head, which is extremely important. After that I found the translocator again and teleported myself out of the mines, back to the archives. I went back through the well ladder and to the engineering room again. Here I attached the pump to complete the machinery. And now the part that truly scares me, because I knew what awaited me. And one mistake could cost me almost 50 hours of recording now. But whatever happens next, the doors to the library are now wide open. So I walked into the corridor and jumped down through the crevice in the floor. And here it was, the injured Eidolon. Time to wake him up. The fight started with me getting hit 3 times by his melee attack, which is not ideal and kind of embarrassing actually. So I spent a moment sitting in the corner, using up my precious bandages, yet still getting damaged by his AoE attacks. This is the first 10 seconds of the fight, and I am already low enough to be almost one-shot. I started throwing my iron spears at him, but they weren't very effective, so I resorted to trying mostly melee attacks, thanks to which I could deal a ton of damage in quick succession, before quickly retreating. The fight was going fairly well, until the boss started spawning locusts, and that's when my attention had to be split between dodging boss AoE attacks and trying to kill several small and hard-to-hit spiders. I also started slowly running out of healing items. I didn't have bandages, and the poultices were not cutting it. And at points, I was getting very dangerously low, while having literally only 3 poultices left, which only heal like 2 or 3 pips of health each. I was in a very bad position right now. So, with my last effort and no healing items left, I absolutely focused 100% of my attention on the boss, trying to deal damage while dodging the incoming attacks.
Oh my god, okay. Oh, I have no more healing items. I don't know why I didn't take more. I had more.
I managed to kill the Eidolon. This was absolutely nerve-wracking. I literally needed to stop for a solid minute just to chill out. Had I been hit by the boss just one more time, the outcome of this fight could have been completely different. But I did it. I survived the Resonance Archives in hardcore vintage story, even if just barely. So now I entered the library corridor, ignited the furnace for the lights, and took a couple of deep breaths in this beautiful place as a reward. I read through the story stuff on the resonator and then grabbed everything that was valuable here. And after I felt like I've had enough, I finally left. I took the ladder back up, and just like that, I was out. Emerged victorious. Beating the archives on normal vintage story took me a bit of time, I died several times while doing so as well. But doing it with a weak armor, underprepared with healing items, and on a permadeath mode is a completely different experience. But now I started making my way back home, away from the ominous mountains. And after a good walk, I came back to the familiar pine forest, where I defeated the bear, and then straight to my little village. And everything here is just waiting for me. I can finally rest and spend the rest of my days doing something more cozy. The wall of fish is still a wall of shame, so I need to change that. So firstly, I decided to find a new vegetable, recently added to the game, the fennel, and it's a must-have ingredient for better fish bait. But also I needed to find borax, because barrels with water and borax powder let you taxidermize the fish you catch. So I started looking around for fennel plants on the eastern shore, and honestly, it wasn't hard to find at all. It just kind of grows here, around here. Never seen it before though. You can also grow it, but it takes a very long time to mature, so it's probably not worth it right now. But what I did have issues with is the borax. It was really hard to find some, even with all the prospecting and stuff. My only chance of finding it was in this little desert here, where the highest reading was poor, but at least it was there. Thankfully, borax ore has a tendency to spawn ore bits at the very top, meaning that I didn't really have to dig out half of the desert to find it. So, whenever I found some borax bits, I knew there was some underneath. Even if digging in a desert is a bit annoying due to the sand falling on my head, and the constant threat of drifters and other short kings roaming the area constantly. But I did spend quite a while here just digging. Happy about it too. I managed to get about 3 stacks of it overall, which is pretty nice. So, using my windmill, I ground it all up into powder. Then, I moved most of the barrels inside the fishing hut and filled them up with water. And then, I added the powdered borax to make a diluted borax solution. You put a fish inside, and it comes out as a decorative, taxidermized trophy. So, the fishing hut is ready for some action now. So at home, I cooked up some fish bait using fennel and some meat with water, giving me about 24 bait to use with my fishing rod, but I will possibly have more. So now the fun part. I unparked my old raft and rowed to the middle of the lake. And now, peace and quiet. All I have to do is just catch a bunch of fish and enjoy the process. And I did catch a lot of fish, from small and rather unimpressive to huge ones I could barely hold in my small blocky hands.
Oh, that's a huge fish. That's a big boy.
And whenever I caught something new, I was immediately putting it in the barrels for a day. But some fish had to be caught more traditionally, without the bait and the rod. So for those, I had my special iron spears ready. And my wall of imaginary trophies started being filled up with actual fish trophies pretty quickly after. And I did all of that until day 100. And until all my wall mounts were full of lake dwellers. I caught many different fish, from catfish to moonfish to fishfish and others. Big, small, doesn't matter. I had achieved my goal of creating a small village, progressing the game in a meaningful way, and beating the archives. And all of that on one life. Thank you all for watching. I hope you had a good time and that you will watch some of my other videos that are similar to this one. But for now, I say bye bye.